we're going to have a bit of a chat today. So this will be a bit of a talking, reflective vlog. I'll try to throw in some chapters of the stuff we're going to talk about today, because today we're chatting about my novel that I've been writing under the name Project Caramel Latte. And I think that we need to have like a lengthy chat. I kind of started having this chat earlier in like my reset week vlog, and I found it was just a lot. And as I was doing it, I was realizing I need to have like a separate chat about this. So if you are new around here, hello. It's nice to see you. My name is Vivian Asimos. I am a researcher and a writer. I am primarily a writer of nonfiction works. I have published 4 nonfiction books. And I have been working on a fiction novel, which I have been writing under the project title Project Caramel Latte. It is an urban fantasy mystery. It's supposed to be the first book in a series. I have been showing this book on this channel for quite a while, so we're gonna kind of chat about a couple of things. It's kind of why I feel like I have to have a chat with you about this, because you have been following a lot of the steps of the process, and so it'd be kind of weird to just not have this conversation with you, even though, I'll be honest, I haven't really made any kind of formal decisions, and I probably won't for quite a while, but I've made one big decision, and that is that I am no longer going to be showing it on this channel. And so I want to talk a little bit about the project, about kind of where I'm at in the process with this novel, and also kind of what decisions I'm going to be making. And then the last thing I will talk about is why I have decided not to show it on camera. I think that in order to explain that, I need to kind of explain everything else. So I'm going to try to put chapters in this, so if you want to skip any of those bits, you can. But let's start with Project Caramel Latte. So for people who don't know, I've actually been writing fiction for a very, very, very long time. I just have never published it. But I always stand on the fact that just because you don't publish something doesn't mean that you are not increasing your skill, that you are not a fiction writer. You know, any of you guys who do fan fiction or who just write for your own pleasure, that is absolutely valid, and you are just as much of a writer as anybody else. And so yeah, I've been writing fiction for a really long time. That was actually what I initially went to uni for. I did my undergraduate degree in creative writing, and I double majored because I did it in America, so there's double majoring. I double majored in creative writing and in religious studies, which is kind of the anthropology, sociology, and history of religion. I discovered the anthropology of religion while I was doing my undergraduate degree. That is what I specialize in as a nonfiction writer. And I basically had these 2 lives of mine, my nonfiction and my fiction, kind of colliding simultaneously during those couple of years. The creative writing program really made me question a lot about my experience and my ability to do fiction writing. And I've heard a lot of other people have similar sentiments, but for very different reasons. I fundamentally thought differently than a lot of the people that I was surrounded by, and I didn't realize that that's what it was. I just thought it was my failing. Essentially, I have aphantasia, which means that I do not imagine visually, and I didn't realize that people did imagine visually until I was like in my mid to late 20s, and I was living in the UK, and I was married, and I was already having a PhD and all of that kind of stuff. Like, it was far, far later in life that I learned this, but I was surrounded by people talking about writing things that you can see and wanting to focus on visualizations, and that's not what I do as a reader, and it's not what I do as a writer. And so it made me feel like I was lacking somewhere. And at the same time, I was finding anthropology of religion. I was falling in love with the dissection of people. I found a lot of the same things that I like about writing fiction. In doing anthropology of religion, you get to really study people. You get to really explore why they are the way that they are. You get to really delve into the meat of personality and storytelling, and you can tell the stories of other people in a way that is as empathetic and as caring and as ethical as humanly possible, while still keeping room for critique. And I think there are ways to critique with love and care and empathy. I hope that this is something that I have done in my own personal work, but I guess that's something that you guys can tell me whether or not you agree. But that was something that I was finding at the same time, and I had people praising my writing. I was writing in a way that was very accessible, that was very understandable, that was very clear, and I felt like all of that work that I had done with fiction up until that point was just to make it so my nonfiction could really, really shine. And I firmly believed that for a really long time. And despite the fact that I do have a part of me that wishes that I had known what was going on, maybe I wouldn't have given up on writing for as long as I did, writing fiction for as long as I did. I probably could have been writing fiction alongside all of my academic work for a really long time, which is what I'm doing now. I could have just been doing that this whole time, and maybe I'd be a lot further in the fiction career than I am. And while there is a part of me that kind of always sits and wonders, what if, I am really glad that I had the experiences that I did and the questions that I had, because I do wonder if I would have pursued the anthropology of religion the way that I did if I had still held on some kind of weird hope for the fiction. I don't know. I don't know if I would have thought that I was capable of doing both at the same time. I would have thought I'd have to pick one. So I don't regret it. But basically, after I learned why I was feeling strange about writing, that was when I started reading a lot more again, and I started realizing what it was that I liked in books and what I didn't like in books, and why I now had a name for it and a reason and an explanation. And I started realizing that I could write again. And so November of 2022, I want to say, I did NaNoWriMo as a way of kind of trial by fire, throwing me back into the world of writing fiction. And this was the very first attempt at Project Caramel Latte. I'm not going to call it the same thing because it was so inherently different. It was an urban fantasy mystery, and my two main characters are the same. I have kind of like a duo cop situation, and those two characters were the same, but everything else was different. Like, everything else was different, and it wasn't very good. But I learned what was bad. I learned how to kind of fix things, and I wrote a new book with those two as my kind of main buddy cop source, and this became Project Caramel Latte. And I was really proud of this one, though there was something kind of off with it. And I started querying it anyway. And I documented this in a different vlog on querying way too early. I basically knew that there was something wrong with it. I didn't know what. And it turns out it was just structured not the way that I would have wanted it to be structured. It was structured like a fantasy and not like a mystery, which was essentially... the mystery was what I was wanting to structure it as. And so it kind of failed in that regard. I rewrote it and started re-querying it. And that's where we are today. It is June, like the last day of June of 2025. So I have been working on some variant of these characters and this idea since November of 2021. November of 2022. So I have been querying Project Caramel Latte for a while now. I obviously had like the quick start that I filmed and talked about, where I got a manuscript request who then ultimately said no, and I realized it was because of the structure being wrong. So I have been querying since about January. I recognize that means it's only been like 6 months. I know some people query for a lot longer, and I know that the process is really different for a lot of people, but this is where we get to where I am now, which is that I'm looking at my list of places to send to, and I'm kind of very quickly running out of people. I have maybe 4 or 5 agents left on my list. Yeah, I have 5 left to send to. So to give kind of a full aspect of where my querying is, let me sum up some stuff here. So I have sent out 23 queries. I have been rejected by 12, and I have been ghosted by 8. So by ghosted, I mean that I sent them a query and I just never ever actually heard anything at all. And it's kind of frustrating. So I've had more than just myself read my book. I had the agent who did the manuscript request. I sent it back to him once I had fixed some stuff. So he's read it and gave me some notes. I had an agent at the Bournemouth Writing Festival write back with some notes, and I had a beta reader read it and give me some notes. And I think what is complicated and annoying and frustrating is that none of the responses or comments have been in any way negative. I have been told that it is very well written. It is an interesting story. It's incredibly marketable. It's a very sellable genre. It's incredibly well crafted. I have had all of these notes, all of them, and the dialogue is good. The only questions that I have gotten were that because I am newer to fiction, I should have an agent that has more time, was one of them. The only other note that I have gotten, and I was very hesitant to talk about this, but I think it's really important to, is I have kind of 2 main characters. So I have my narrator character, and I have the main, like, detective character. And the detective character is a black man. And I have received the note that I should not have him be black. The reason why wasn't that I didn't do a good job representing being black in the UK, or that it read poor or anything like that. Those weren't the notes. The note was that there is already an urban fantasy mystery series where the detective is black, and that is the Rivers of London series. And if that already exists, then there's no need for my detective to also be black. That was the note. And, yeah. I obviously disagree with this. I am not going to be changing my character because of that. The fact that he is black is incredibly important to his role in the series. It's incredibly important to his character. It's incredibly important to the way that people treat him, which is important to the detective. It's just, yeah, like, I'm not changing that, and I'm definitely not changing it for that stupid of a reason. If I had done something poor, I'm obviously not of color, and if I had done something poor in my representation that was important to note, then yes, like, tell me, I want to do better, I want to change, I want to make sure that I'm representing people properly. But that's not what the notes were. And I'm willing to get those notes, but I'm not willing to get a note that just says we're not going to have a black character just because a black character already exists. Like, yeah, so do white detectives. So why do I need to not have a black detective? I don't understand. And it's very easy, when it first happened, I was very easily able to say, I don't want you anyway, if that's going to be your opinion. But then I started looking at my list. And I started looking at how many people ghosted, and I started looking at how many people rejected within a day or two. And it could be that it just didn't fit their vibe. It could be that they read my blurb and went not interested, or it could be for similar reasons. And I'm never going to know. And I wanted to talk about this because I recognize that despite this, that this is still a certain level of privilege that I have that some other writers don't, that I could theoretically change my character and then get different responses, while writers who are of color don't necessarily have the ability to change that about themselves, and will always be sat there wondering, did I get ghosted? because I'm Black, or is it just because that's what happens in the industry? Yeah, I mean, it's a very, very, very small glimpse of what other people have to go through, but it's a glimpse and it's frustrating, and I get it. I get it as much as I think I'm possibly going to be able to. So this whole experience of some of those notes, of getting a lot of positive feedback from people who have read it and read sections of it, but without any actual draw, has made me really question what I'm going to be doing next. I'm not done querying. There's still, like I said, there's still a couple of agents left on my list to send to. And then on top of that, I also have, I'm going to start sending to some indie publishers. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about why I didn't send to indie publishers right at the beginning. Hold on. I don't know if this is going to look weird, but I don't know if I care. The reason why I didn't send to indie publishers already has nothing to do with how I feel about indie publishers. In fact, when I was querying the cosplay book, Cosplay: The Dressing of Identity, I sent simultaneously to agents and publishers. Like, that's what I was sending to. I just heard back from a publisher way faster, and it was actually within my first 5 that I sent to was the publisher that ended up publishing it. So I didn't really get a huge experience of querying, and I didn't get a chance, it felt like, to even get an agent interested because of how quickly the publisher responded. That's why I didn't send to publishers yet for the fiction. I wasn't sure if the fiction was going to be easier in a way to sell because my nonfiction isn't exactly like a preconceived category of nonfiction. And despite the fact that I already have a track record, that doesn't always mean that people are on board with it. So I thought it would be easier maybe to do it with fiction. I also wasn't sure how easy it was going to be to send to publishers immediately as a fiction writer, because with nonfiction, there are even some publishers that are closed to unsolicited queries for fiction, but they're open for nonfiction because they just don't get nearly as many nonfiction queries, and so they're able to do that. And so there was a part of me that thought, well, then it'd be better to get an agent for fiction and stay unagented for nonfiction. So that's kind of what I was thinking. It has nothing to do with my view of indie publishers. In fact, I think the ideal situation for me personally is to get with an indie publisher who I work really well with. We get on, we connect really well, and I'm able to just publish a series with them and constantly publish with them. Like, they're my main connecting point, and that's my relationship, and I don't really have to worry about getting an agent or anything like that. The thing with an agent is that they're useful if you need to get some big major publishing deal, if you want to have people bidding over your book, if you want to be able to go with one of the big 5 publishers, then yeah, getting an agent is probably going to be your step number 1. But for me, I'm not massively bothered about any of that. Obviously it would be nice. Obviously I'm not going to say no to that. I would be thrilled for that, but I don't see that as inherently necessary either. If I make it with an indie publisher and I'm happy with them and everything works out with them and I have a great relationship with them, that's just as much of a success to me as having some bidding war and being with HarperCollins or something. Do you know what I mean? I just don't really see one as necessarily more successful than the other. So I am going to be starting to send to indie publishers next, but because I only have a couple of agents left and then it's indie publishers, and I'm trying to stick to indie publishers in the UK, there's a couple of reasons why for that. One is I want to be able to have easy communication with them. It would be nice if they lived, their housing was somewhere kind of close to me, because then I could go there, I could visit them, I could have meetings with them, and it would be very easy and flowy. The other thing is that my setting in my book is really important to the book, and my setting is here in Salisbury, and I just don't know if people outside of the UK are going to really care as much or see the importance of that as much as maybe a UK publisher would, particularly one outside of London. would be great because they would also see the benefit of setting a book outside of London. I have a very quickly growing list. I've been very slowly grabbing a list of all of the publishers to send to. I've been taking my time with it, but it has made me start thinking about what happens if my list runs out, right? Like, what happens if I don't get anywhere with these indie publishers? What happens if these last 5 agents also either reject me or ghost me? And then I'm left with an empty list and nowhere to send this. What do I do with Project Caramel Latte at that point? Because that's something that I'm having to genuinely ask myself, because it's looking more and more like that could be the case. There's basically 2 primary options that I have for this. The first is that I could put it on a shelf, basically. I have an idea for another book. I'm going to start writing it, another fiction book, not part of this series, completely separate, standalone book. I could write that, really polish it, query it. If I do manage to get an agent with that book, then I can say, oh, and by the way, I have this series that's kind of been on a back shelf. So that's one thing I could do. There are some pros and cons to this. The pro is obviously that it gets the same outcome. It just takes a little longer and is more roundabout to get there. However, one of the cons is that they could always say, no, that doesn't work. I don't like that. And then I'm basically in the same position, and I have put it on the back burner in this kind of wild hope for no reason. So there's that. There's that option. And then there's the second option, which is something that I had considered doing when I first wrote the first one, which is that I could release it free online as a serialization. So basically once a week, certain number of words or a chapter or something like that gets sent out to people, and you can read the whole book that way. And at the end, I can self-publish it, and it can be a print-on-demand, ebook, whatever you want. You can then buy it. Basically, I have self-published the book in that regard. And that's option number 2, is basically self-publishing, with the caveat that I would serialize first, primarily A, to build an audience, to get them interested in buying the book, and 2, to give me time to accrue the money together and kind of get everything together ready for the self-publishing launch at the end of the serialization. So those are my 2 options, basically, is put it on a back burner and wait and hope that maybe book 2 will get me somewhere, or, give in to my impatience and just get it out there on my own terms, on my own dime, and see what happens. Now, neither of these options are necessarily bad. There's no wrong answer to this. There's no right answer to it. It's just, these are 2 options, and they're both completely valid, and they are both completely possible, and they both have just as much positive reasons to do it as they do negative reasons to do it. Yeah, I'm not somebody who looks down on self-publishing. I don't really care, especially if you have an audience. Like, you do you, man. Like, the only reason why I have been going about doing things traditionally is that I didn't really feel like I had the energy or the ability to do the book marketing on my own, which you would kind of have to do as a self-publisher. But as time has gone on, as I have been doing these vlogs, as I have been growing Incidental Mythology as my nonfiction brand and doing all sorts of things there, I've started a Substack. I already have 4 subscribers and one of them paid, and I'm recording this the day before my very first one actually comes out. And I know that 4 subscribers really isn't huge, but I haven't put out anything yet, and I have 4 subscribers and 1 paid. Like, that is crazy. And looking at that and looking at how I have been really pushing myself online and really pushing my abilities, I do feel like maybe I could do it. Maybe I could do it. I don't know. And basically, I think that essentially I'm not going to be making that inherent decision anytime soon. So there are two things that are going to have to happen before I make that decision. The first is that I need to actually run through my list, because I might be going through all of this. I might be explaining all of this to you. I might be kind of feeling very doom and gloom for a reason that I don't have. Like, I could be getting an email tomorrow saying, let's go, you know, I doubt it, but it is, I guess, possible, you know, that's not impossible. So I could get with one of these agents that I've left. I could get with one of these publishers that I have on my list, in which case none of this really matters, right? I could, you know, all of this kind of conversation doesn't really amount to anything. The reason why I wanted to have a conversation about this is for A, the fact that the vlog is going to be a little bit different and not include this anymore, and I wanted to address why. But B, because I might not, and by might I mean definitely, I'm not the only person in this situation. I'm sure other people have been feeling this way about their own work, and if you haven't, you probably will at some point. And so I wanted to be able to kind of open up that feeling, because I think during this time that I've been really feeling really frustrated with it, I've been looking online, and obviously, you know, there's people sharing all of their good news, right? They don't share their bad news, really. They share all their good news. Look, I made this decision and this is how successful it's been. Look, I did this. Look, I did that. You know, I published a book. I got agency representation. I got a bidding war for my novel. You know, all of those kinds of things. And I'm happy for them all. But at some points when you're in your like darkest moment with it, you can kind of look at that and feel like you are alone in feeling frustrated. And I know that the people that I don't know personally have probably been here as well. And if they haven't been, they will. You know, this is just the process. But I wanted to be a little bit honest about it, in case you're here as well. Like, you're not the only one. We're in this together, I think. So basically, I kind of wanted to do that too. I feel like I'm rambling. What was I talking about? There are two things that I kind of want to do is go through my list, make sure that I've actually submitted to all of these places. I want to exhaust my list before I make any kind of rash decisions. And the second thing that I want to do is I have actually been in the middle of writing book 2. I have been documenting it on this channel. I think I am like 35, 39, something like that. I don't know, somewhere in there. I am 30-something thousand words into the manuscript for book 2. I don't want to just like, I've had to put it on the back burner for the last couple of months, and I don't want to completely like neglect it until this decision has been made, because that doesn't seem smart. Like, the idea is in my head at the moment. I'm in the mode of writing it. I'm in the mode of thinking about it. I should just finish it. So I am going to be writing Caramel Latte book 2, but I'm going to be doing it off the vlog. I'm not going to be recording myself working on it at all. I'm not going to be talking about it on this channel. I'm just going to write it. And then once I have the rough draft, then I will put it aside. My idea is that I won't even start the process of making this decision until next calendar year. It gives me time to go through my list. It gives me time to really think about what I want to be doing and how I want to be doing it. I've already given a lot of thought to how I would do the serialization and how much it would cost, what my budget would be for self-publishing, how I would get those funds, thinking about it all and putting it all together and really considering it. I think this is not a decision to just make hastily. Again, not because there's any bad option, right? Like, they're both fine. They're both viable. If I had a friend of mine that was in this situation and they were saying, these are my two options, what do you think is the better option? I'd say, well, I don't know. It depends. Depends on you. It depends on what you want. It depends on what your goals are. It depends on, like, it's not like one is just inherently shitty. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's so I don't know. I think that's what makes it kind of almost more of a hard decision. And I don't want to make that decision on camera. I don't want to feel pressured to make any certain decisions because of it being recorded. And I know that there's only like there's only like 10 of you that watch this, right? Like there's my channel is not huge. I am not under any kind of illusion that this channel is massive. I think I get on average like 100 views maybe per vlog, and that's like on a good day. So like that's a higher average if I skewed up. So like I know that this isn't like massive. I don't have millions of people like telling me what I should or shouldn't be doing. But at the same time, I think knowing that like 100 people are watching you write a book, like that's a lot of people. Like, I don't know. Like if you had like 100 people, I saw somebody talk about this on Substack of like, you know, saying that you only have 10 subscribers doesn't seem like a lot, but imagine if 10 people came in and robbed your house. Like that's how it feels, right? Like if I know there's only like 100 people that watch this video, but like if 100 people were sat around waiting for me to do something and asking me about what's happening next, like that would be really intimidating. So, you know, just keeping that in mind, like I don't want to have that pressure on me for both the writing and for the making of the decision. And I think because while I could just show the writing and then just drop it off the face of the earth, if I do end up putting it on the back burner and never looking at it again for the agent, I don't want to have to keep explaining that. I also don't want to feel like I have to self-publish it just because I had 100 people asking me where something was. Do you know what I mean? Like I don't want to make a decision purely based off of social media and that kind of presence. I just don't think that's fair to me. It's not fair to my work. It's not fair to any of that. So yeah, that's it. So I'm going to be not showing Project Caramel Latte again on this channel, at least not for the time being, not until a decision has been made, not until I have something more definitive to say. I'm just not going to be sharing it in order to alleviate that kind of pressure. And this was a very, very lengthy, rambly, 40 minutes. Ugh. Anyway, this was a very rambly 40 minutes to explain a lot as to what's been going on and why it's been happening. I don't really know what to say to round this out. If you are in a position where you aren't really sure what to do or how to go about things, like, man, that's writing, that's life, that sucks. But it's also sometimes when really exciting things happen. If I did do this serialization, I think it would be really fun, but so would just publishing it. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I think I would have a good time with it either way, and I'd be really excited about it either way. Hopefully you would be in the same boat. And if you're not in the same boat, if one of them just feels really dready to you, then maybe that's your answer, you know? So thanks. Thanks for listening to me. Thanks for sitting here and listening to me complain about stuff that hasn't even happened yet, but it's just been really on the front of my mind, and I think it is for the best that I stop documenting my experience with Project Caramel Latte. So I hope that you understand. If you don't understand, then I don't know. I guess you could always ask me about it in the comments, or you could just unsubscribe and leave. That's also fine. I totally get it. Now, that being said, we are going to be doing work on some fiction stuff, not only the short stories, but that other book that I kind of hinted at and mentioned a little bit. I'm going to be working on that new fiction series, and you are going to hear more about that in just like a vlog or two. I'm going to start working on it next week. So you are going to hear about it very, very, very soon. So if you want to know about that and all that kind of stuff, you can go ahead and subscribe so you do not miss when it first starts showing up. I'll probably actually start putting together a playlist of when I work on it. And yeah, thanks. Thanks, guys. And I'll talk to you next time. Bye.